Hello there. How is everybody today? Okay, could I get this side of the room to come over here and shake hands with this side of the room, and then you guys come over here and shake hands here? We've got 5 minutes for that. Just kidding. Just kidding. Go ahead and sit down. Want to make sure everybody's awake. We always like to start with a little story to kind of liven things up and get everybody awake. And I'm going to tell you a story about some Grovant friend of mine who is Cree father, his adopted father. Grovants and Crees are both in the northern part of Montana. And one time my friend's father asked him to come over and eat with them, have a meal. And in Indian country, have a meal has a lot more to do with just eating. We have prayer at that time, and there's a lot of things that happen. Well, the Grovants and the Crees, they both, when they eat, they clear like their living room, and they put a tarp down, and they put all the food in the middle. And there's one difference though. At a Grovant feed, everything they hand out, you have to eat. At a Cree feed, and my friend didn't know this until they went to this meal, you can put it in Tupperware. And so, being the good Grovant men that they were, he had two friends with him. They all sat down. His father prayed. They started to eat, and they kept eating and kept eating, while everybody else, after they ate their fill, they pulled their Tupperware out from behind them and started letting the food go in the Tupperware. And my friends kept eating. And if I'm a little big, but he makes me look thin. And he stutters, so that made his joke his story all the funnier. Eating and eating and eating, and he got to the point where he was hurt and in very much pain. And so the father, right after the feed, started to pray. And a traditional Indian prayer isn't something that you hear in church here. This goes on. They pray for every tree, every leaf, every blade of grass, every animal, every rabbit. If you've seen how many rabbits we have, you know that that's a lot. And he kept praying, and his buddy right next to him, he's sitting there and he's going, oh, you know. And his buddy right next to him said, Preston. And he said, what? He says, I can't feel my legs. And Preston said, well, stand up. And so he stood up, and you know that when something falls asleep and you move it like that, the blood rushes back to it, right? Stood up, and while this guy's praying and everybody else is quiet, all the pans are in the middle of the room. And he says, ah! And he took off forward, fell right through the pans, was kicking them all around, went through the people on the other side and landed on the wall. And walking down the wall, ah! He was screaming. And these stepped there with their heads down and still praying. And Preston was sitting there. He said, I was folded up. He said, I was trying not to laugh, but I was hurting. He said, he said, and he'd scream again, and I'd go, He said this went on for about 5 minutes. The guy crawled all the way down the wall, got out, and there was a bunch of, in our language, our grandmothers is called our kalas. And there was a bunch of and their little kalas, and he started using their heads for a crutch on the way out, screaming, ah! And he got out the door, and all this time Preston is going into vapor lock because he laughed. And he's sitting there, and they got finished, and his father, his Cree father, got done praying and looked over and says, what the hell is wrong with you, Grovant? He said he couldn't get up and out of there fast enough. He said as soon as he got up, and the other friend didn't move a muscle. He sat there like that all the way through it. So he yanked him up and says, come on, let's get out of here. And you think that guy would stay out. I wouldn't have went back in. But right after he walks back in, he says, oh, man, I feel better. But Preston was already hitting him in the chest saying, get out of here, let's go. And he says, I know we didn't get over the hill before those Crees were laughing at us. But before that, they didn't say a word. So, but that's just a little story I thought I'd give you guys to wake you up a little bit. Again, once again, my name is Lane. I'm from the Abzaliga Nation. You guys know us as Crows, but that is a name that was given to us by the French. When we went to tell them who we were, we said we explained that we're Abzaliga, and they said, "What does that mean?" And we said that we're children of the long-beaked bird, which is an eagle actually, from the beak. But for some reason they thought we meant crow, and so they named us Crow. We are from Montana, most of the eastern part of Montana and part of the western part of North Dakota, South Dakota, and most of northern Wyoming was all crow land when we ran into the first people through here, besides Lewis and Clark. So in the first treaty that we have with the United States, we have our original land, which is around 38 million acres. But after that, it started down every time, and now we have 2.3 million acres left. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, with social justice, about what happened right around the 1900s, and then I'm going to tie that into what's happening now. This is something that happened in, it started in actually the late 1800s, and it came into the 1900s, and now I'll explain other things to you. This is the shrinking of the Abzaliga land, homelands. This in our country, sugar beets are everywhere. It's a major industry. It's kind of like your coal around here. I heard you guys have 4 or 5 plants, or 5 or 6? Is it that many? Or not plants, but mines that you're mining out of. So the impact of sugar beets on the land cessation or land cession of the 1.15 million acres was the last cessation of crow land. South of the Yellowstone River, it shrank our land by 1/3. So the last time it shrank our land, it was by 1/3. Okay. For the love of sugar, our lands were taken. The Montana sugar beet industry has made a lasting effect on our tribal land, and that millions, if not billions of dollars are made by the production and harvesting of sugar beets within our boundaries, and very little of that profit goes to any of the tribal landowners where the beets are grown. Why is this? When did this start? How did the non-Indians decide to move here and start growing beets? Up until the settlers came west, we had no sugar beets. We didn't know what those were. They came from somewhere else. Our land was wild. We had things that we grew, but we didn't grow it like normal people, or I would say normal mainstream people do now. We didn't have rows of fields. We have things, we call one planting that we do, we call the Three Sisters. It's got tomatoes, beans, and corn. And they all grow together in a pile. We don't grow them in long rows. We do the Three Sisters here. They all grow together, and then we do them over here. Wherever we're living, we don't grow a lot. We grow what we need, and then we would, once we moved, because we were a nomadic tribe. In the summertime, we all came together, but in the wintertime, we had 3 different bands, and we went different areas. The 3 main bands, I guess I should say, there's all together now, but there was 3 to begin with. We had the mountain crow, we had the river crow, and we had the kicked-in-the-bellies. And I'll tell you how the kicked-in-the-bellies got their name. The first time we saw horses, there was a group of crows that went down around Utah, and they ran into horses. And there was one that had a colt, and this brave, or this person that got it, didn't know, or it was a male colt, I'll just put it that way. And he didn't know what those 2 things were that were hanging there. And he grabbed it. What is this? And he grabbed it and squeezed it, and that colt didn't like it, so it kicked him. And so that's how they got their name, is kicked in the bellies. So, But anyway, these three groups, we would be at different areas and then come back, okay, in the summertime and meet. Well, as we went through life, and as the U.S. government brought people west, our land started shrinking, like I was saying, and we got to the point where we were just down to those almost 3.5 million acres, and they found out that beets, the type of land that was there was good for beets, and we'll talk about that a little bit more here. So in researching for his honors thesis, one of my friends, Soren Jessen, noticed some very interesting coincidences involving the start of the beet industry in Montana and the forced cession of the land by the Absaligan Nation, shrinking it to our present-day boundaries. I have noticed 3 key points to his research, which are as follows. Okay, the first point. The first studies by a guy named Harvey Washington Wiley in the 1890s showed the practicality of beet sugar in the American West. He discovered good soil, temperate climate in that area. So as he was going through everything, and especially right below the river, the Yellowstone River, was one of the best places in the United States to grow sugar beets. And it became a catalyst for the government to force a deal with the Crows in 1899 to cede the land for the coming flood of immigrants to this area. They planned on it almost being like an Oklahoma land rush again, where they had many people that would come, and so they were preparing that 1.15 million acres for that. And this is what it looked like. Does this point for me? Whoops. I guess it doesn't. Anyway, if you look up here, the Yellowstone River is right above that 71, and right in that area was the best area, and this was the boundaries of the Crow Reservation at that time in 1891. The river is that top border, if you can see the similarity there. All right, the top, or the land cessation was the top part of that, the top third of that part right there. This is what we have left now, aside from that top third. Okay, that was the first part. The second part was a guy named Francis Liu. He eventually became the commissioner on Indian Affairs, but at the time that this happened, he was just a lobbyist, I believe, and he had talked about the sugar beets as being a viable industry, and what he said was it will be a great thing for the Crows to be able to grow their own beets, start their own industry, and become competent farmers. And he had some good, in his own words, and it might be right here. Yeah, he said in his speech in 1903, before the opening of the seeding land, he said this, let me tell you of another thing I have been trying to do. Lease all the unlotted lands of the reservation that are capable of having water brought upon them. Leased all but the homesteads of the allotted Indians. Import a group of first-rate white people. This is how he put it. First-rate white people. And teach those Indians who wish to learn the art of translating the beet into sugar. Now, the problem was he wanted 20-year leases for all of those first-rate white people. And at the time, the Crows could only do 5-year leases, and that was to prevent things like this from happening, people taking over the land. Okay, so the lease was for 20 years in which to leave them when the manufacturers withdraw in possession of a great deal more property than they started out with. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Well, the following year, the land was ceded without the tribe ever receiving the promised money for the land. And even to this day, I don't think we've received that money. The deal was money, horses, and cattle for 1.15 million acres. We didn't receive a penny of it. Now this area is called the Huntley Project, and it's one of the richest areas in this part of the country. But none of it belongs to the Crows anymore because it was taken from us, or with this seeding. And the Billings Sugar Factory was incorporated in 1905, and the factory was built in 1906. So all of the sugar beet industry of southeast Montana started with the seeding of this land, the promise of things happening, the good things to happen for the Crows. And then here's what happened in 1910. Francis Leop, who by this time was a commissioner on Indian Affairs, was lamenting on the failed attempt of the tribal land. It has always seemed to me a pity that where a reservation has a soil and climate particularly adapted to some special industry at which the resident Indians could make a success, a part of the surplus land should not be reserved for their use in this way, and they be encouraged to turn it to account as white people would in a similar way. And then he said, I found private parties who were ready to put up the capital for a sugar manufacturing plant accessible to the reservation and to furnish the white farmers necessary to oversee the plantation and direct the labor on it. You guys remember what happened, what they were talking about before? It was going to be Indian farmers farming their own land with some first-rate white people coming over to show us how to do it. Well, all of a sudden now the white farmers are overseeing their plantations, and the laborers are the Crow people. It says, this seems to attest to the idea that beet farms weren't in fact meant to give the Crows ownership of the land, as he stated in 1903 speech, but rather allow the Crows to work as field hands for the whites. To no one's surprise, the farms became the ownership of the farmers who, until the cession of the land, would have had to lease the land for the 5-year periods. Okay, so does that make sense to everybody? Do we understand what all's happening here now? Okay, and then number 3, following the alleged failed attempt, the U.S. tried to force cessation of another 2 million acres of tribal land, which would have left us with 300,000. Now, I told you at the beginning that we started out with 38 million acres. We ended up down to having a fight for our last 2 million acres. Under the idea that the Crows were a diminishing tribe, and that means that our death rate was higher than our birth rate. In the 1900s, at the turn of the century, from the 1800s to the 1900s, there were just over 1,000 Crows left. Earlier in the century, we had 10,000 lodges at one time. Now, 10,000 lodges would be about 30,000 to 40,000 people that were of the Crow Nation, the Abzaligan Nation. In that time, they started putting us on the reservations. They started forcing us to become pretty much welfare recipients. I have a friend that we give presentations together, and I'd never heard it this way, but he was talking while I was standing there, and he said, 150 years ago, there was not one Crow on welfare. And I thought about that, and I said, that's right. Because we hunted on our own, we had our own land, we took care of ourselves, we had our societies of warriors to take care of us, so we had our societies of hunters and scouts. We had our own society. Then the United States came along and decided that they knew what we needed. And it was just amazing that we had survived all these years without their great brilliance and expertise. And after they were done with this, after about 100 years, now we have 75% unemployment on the reservation. They no longer are around in the reservation, but now we are kind of by ourselves. We're stuck there. And as we talk about social justice, I talked to 8 of my colleagues, 8 faculty at Little Bighorn University. When I was coming out, I said, I want to do a little bit of a unofficial survey. And so I went around and asked them, I said, what do you think, how do you think about the social justice here? 5 out of 8 said exactly this: there is none. The 6th one was she said, she added on, there's none in healthcare, because her field is healthcare. And that's kind of where we're at in our situation. We have 75% unemployment. Right now, we're in a battle we just had our primary election last Saturday, and we're trying to get our chairman and our other people out, chairman, vice chairman, secretary, and vice secretary. Or I guess we're not, people are trying, because they say that they're dictators. One of the things that happened to the government is that when they left, and they haven't fully left, but when they started giving us supposed control of it, they taught our people how to be the leaders of the group. And our people were smart. They learned. They learned every bad thing that they taught them, and they continue to pass it down the line. And so we look at the conclusion of this. The sugar empires were started on Absaloga land to, one, provide Absaloga people with better sustainability, and two, to provide more economic structure. The land was taken and given to the whites because, one, the Absaloga were considered a diminishing tribe, and two, they would all die off in the next few decades. And I forgot to add the third one, that they were not good laborers. They did not want to sit under somebody else and get paid pennies to do the work that they should be paying somebody pennies to do, or doing themselves and getting the profit off them. So it turned from the first-rate white people coming out to help, which were all probably politically motivated, or the politics had gotten them in because they knew somebody, which would be Francis Liu, and that money funneled out to somebody else. And it's still, to this day, there are sugar beet farmers all along our canal system, and all of them are non-Crow. None of them are Crow Indian. Billions of dollars is still being made on this, and none of it goes towards the Crows. So in this, as I made this, I made it for my students, and I told them, you need to know your history, because if we don't learn our history, we're doomed to repeat it. And this is happening right now in Crow land. We have come to a water agreement with the state and federal government, and this water agreement, this water compact that our chairman signed, a lot of people believe illegally, is for 400 and some, ooh, that moves. 400 and a little over $400 million. 132 million of that is going to fix the canal system for the Crow Reservation. Guess how many Crows use that canal system? Well, I think there is actually one or two that use it. But most of them are sugar beet farmers that are non-Indian, non-Crow. And if we look at that even more, and these reservation now, they're not the seeded strip, but the reservation. There are sugar beet farmers on the seeded strip that's on the outskirts of the reservation now that have to pay $18, $20 an acre to lease their land. But if you go and lease it on tribal land, they pay $2 an acre to lease it to Crows, or to lease it from Crows. So there's a disparity there as well. When the chairman did this, he had a lot of people that didn't want it done because some of the wording in that, and I think if some of you have dealt with government contracts and stuff, you really got to watch the wording because they will use it against you in any way possible. And I have told my students, I said, non-Indians don't like to deal with the government either because the government has a tendency to turn things on them. But in that document, it says that we waive our rights to ever go against them for taking our water or for anything past, present, or it's for anything, I guess I should say. It doesn't say exactly past. It doesn't say present, doesn't say future. But it says we waive our rights. So basically, what our people believe is that when he signed that document, he waived all of our rights as Crows to be able to do anything. So we're going to court about it right now. We're trying to get that to where that wording is different. The other parts of that money go to other programs that don't really have anything to do with us. There's one it's a coal to liquid program that none of us as Crows really want to have on our reservation, okay? And I know that there's a lot of you going to say, why didn't you guys vote it out? Well, we did vote it out in a sense that he did not get enough votes, because you have to have 2/3 of the voting population to be able to vote something in like that. So he only had 900 votes for. 2/3 of the population of the voting population would be about 4,000 or 5,000. So he had way less than what he should have had. So that shows that socially we don't have any rights as far as being able to have our voice heard, as far as them dealing for us. Our poverty level is very high. I told you what our unemployment level is, 75%. Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah. Some of the things that the U.S. government has tried to do to get rid of this problem with us Indians is, one, they tried to assimilate us to become white, except for our skin, but everything else was supposed to be white. They've done it with boarding schools. At first, they told us that everything that we did was evil. The way we talked, how we grew our hair, how we wore our clothes, our teepees, our whatever. Everything was evil. They put us in these Catholic boarding schools or these Christian boarding schools, and I will tell you guys, I am Christian. But I am Christian because I had an experience with the Lord, and the Lord came to me. But I hated Christians when I was younger. I could not stand them because of this. They would take us out of our homes without permission from our parents. Actually, they didn't think they needed permission from our parents. We were kind of like a subpar level human. To give you an idea of how bad they thought that, back in those days, in the late 1800s, they were taking skulls from from off the land here. They would take them from our lands. Not only ours, but they were taking skulls from the colors of the South. Okay, the slaves. They took both of them to what's the big museum? Smithsonian. And what their goal was is they were trying to prove that Indians and blacks were subhuman to white people, okay? And they took beads that were all the same size. I can't remember if they were glass or steel. And what they were doing is they would fill the brain skull or the brain area with these beads, and then they'd measure them against the other ones, thinking that they would prove that the brain cavity of a Caucasian is bigger, thus making Caucasians smarter than Indians or blacks. What they found out, if they would have had a brain to begin with, is number one, Indians and blacks are usually bigger than Caucasians. In my tribe, the average height is 6'3", 6'2", 6'3". I'm small for my tribe. And then black people are tall too. So that being said, we have bigger heads than them. But so they tested it, and we actually turned out to have bigger brain or skulls than they did. in both cases. You'll never hear about that because it proved exactly. Oh, you might be able to get it on the internet. I'm not sure what the study was called. But so they had stolen all of that. They took our bodies just for these kind of tests so that they could find some way to prove evolutionary that we were subhuman and thus not more than animals, so that they could do with us what they wanted. Okay? Now the diminishing tribe part, we're getting back to that. Like I said, at the turning of 1900, there was just over 1,000 crows left from the 30 to 40,000 that we had before. They wanted to cede that other 2 million acres because we were a diminishing tribe, which means that our death rate was higher than our birth rate, okay? Around 1920, they finally brought the hospital that they had promised as part of the sale of our 38 million acres. And they got the hospital in, and so we started being born, and our birth rate started surpassing our death rate. And with that, we were able to go to Washington. We have 6 districts on the reservation. And they picked 3 good men from each district. And they went to Washington with some of our interpreters and our BIA representative, which actually, for the first time in history, was a good representative. So it was good that he was there at the time. But they all went and they fought, and they won to keep that 2 million acres. Part of the thing is they'd never paid them for the other 1.15 million that they said, or anything like that. So they won it. It's Jay's fault. I've been having senior moments ever since he told me. Yeah. So assimilating. They try to put us or make us white. And then there was the Relocation Act, the Indian Relocation Act, which they tried to put us into society, into urban society, and make us become white that way. Their entire goal has always been to take every piece of land that they can get from us. First they tried to kill them all, then they couldn't do that. Oh, another thing, once they got us on the reservations, you guys remember when the Iraq War started and everybody was just disgusted with this chemical Ali because he was killing Kurds up north? In Indian country, we kind of giggle about this because in the 1800s, the United States was practicing germ warfare on Indians. We would get blankets, part of their deal that we went on the reservation and we'll take care of you. We'll get your clothes, we'll bring you your food, we'll build you schools, we'll build you hospitals. You don't have to worry about it. Well, these blankets that they brought us had smallpox in them. And it killed a lot of people. That's why there were so many crows that died. We had 2 bad smallpox epidemics, if I remember right. And in both of them, we lost a lot of people. Some tribes were totally wiped out, totally gone. They don't have any survivors, just from the smallpox epidemics. So there was that way of trying to take us. They tried the assimilating us. Then they did something called the Indian Allotment Act, and that's what got us down to that 3 million acres from the size of because the size of the tribe or reservation we had before was probably 2 to 3 times as large. The Indian Allotment Act said, you Indians have too much land for as many of you as there is. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to give each of you a section, and that's all you get. And then the rest of it we're gonna open up to settlers and the government. Well, like I said, at that time there was very few Indians or very few Crows left, and so they took just enough for us to still have a reservation, that 3 million acres. But even after that, they said, well, you have too much because we're gonna cede some. So all this time we've been fighting that. And we all say, well, no, that's all in the history. That's past. That never happens now. Well, this water deal If it goes through and we can't fight it, we no longer have water rights on our own river. We're the junior water rights. First it's the state, then it's the tribe, then it's us as individual Crows. So that means if we want to start farming and stuff, we can't, because we only have so much water and now we can't use it. So those are things that we're trying to battle right now. Socially, there's programs. I don't know if you guys know much about the welfare system, but sometimes it's basically just a way to throw money somewhere to appease people, because the money does not make it to the people that need it. Usually it's lost in administration or somewhere along there. I've tried, and many people that I know have tried to start grassroots programs to be able to help people, but we end up running out of money ourselves and have to go on welfare. I'm just, but we have time, and in that process, we lose the battle because we still can't get to help our people. Now, if we could just, and now our people have grown to a point where they depend on the government for everything. Remember I said 150 years ago, we didn't have that problem. Now, that's a major, major problem. Alcoholism affects 100% of the homes or families on the reservation. Meth affects about 75%. We've went in different ways and tried to work with children. I've worked with a youth program. I've worked on my own with drugs and alcohol, trying to help people, and it seems it's always to no avail. Even trying to get the tribe involved, it doesn't work because they don't look at it as helping the person. What they see, one time we had a group a group session where we brought in all the entities in the tribe that had to do with welfare, social services, child welfare, drug and alcohol, and then every program, and I was on the youth program at the time. We came in, we had to go in our little groups. We picked these groups. We had to go in these little groups and decide what we needed to help this certain area. For us, it was the kids, foster kids. So we went over there and said, well, we need a place for them to be. We need beds. We're going to need food. They'll probably need clothes. We're thinking like that. And they said, okay, time's up. Come back. And we had to wait our turn, and everybody had these, those nice big white boards or white papers that everybody draws on. And they walked over and stuck theirs on the wall, and said, we need $750,000. And I thought, man, those guys are so fast that they not only figured out what they need, but they got it in the money. I said, that's good. I don't know if I can do that fast. Next one popped up. We need $1.5 million. And I thought, there's no notes around how they figured that out. Next one popped up. We need $3 million. And they kept popping up. We need. Money, 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 money. And my heart sank, because I know that they weren't there to help the people. They were there to keep their administration costs going, another way to pay for their jobs or maybe their raises. So I was really sad when I went home that night, because I knew that it was still going to be a few more years before we could get them to the point that we're going to be able to help people. And so as dealing with social justice, it is true that on our reservation right now, there is none. There's very little. And it's our goal to continue to raise that awareness. If it happens that the chairman transitions out, the new one coming in may be able to help us. Or the one that's staying may start to take some notice of what's really happening and want to be a part of it. But those are the things that we're battling to this day. So those are the things that we go through on a daily basis. And with social justice, there has to be not just money, but there has to be heart. There has to be intent. If you have all the money in the world, it won't matter if you don't have the intent to help somebody. And that's why those of you that are in the social work program or in humanities or human services or in psychology or in addiction studies, you have to have heart to be able to do the jobs that you do, because there's not going to be a lot of money in it. And you're not going to get a lot of notoriety. As a matter of fact, you're not supposed to get notoriety. People aren't supposed to know who you're taking care of. But in that process, just remember, there's history that you're dealing with in every person that you deal with. And there's future in each one of them people as well. For us, the government tried to make us history. One of the last things that I'll talk to you about is the 99-year leases. The government, back in the early 1900s, made these 99-year leases available to white people coming on the land, knowing or believing that all Indians would be dead within 100 years. So once those leases were up, the people that were on those lands would just be able to keep them. In Syracuse, I think, or Seneca, New York, the 99-year leases were coming up in 1992, I believe. All of a sudden, they started realizing that there was plenty of Seneca still alive and still kicking. And they started, the people that were living on the land, they had houses on the land. It was all part of Seneca, New York, downtown New York, in the suburbs or wherever it is of Seneca. These people started panicking because they said, they're going to take our land from us. So somewhere in 99 years, it went from the Indians' land that we're leasing to our land again. They're going to take our homes. They're going to take our land. Well, they got to that. They almost got the Seneca. They almost freed Seneca from their burden of having that land. But what ended up happening is they realized that the Seneca were not going to try to take the land, that the Seneca knew that they had the lease. All the Seneca wanted was a fair lease deal. And the Seneca got their fair lease deals. But these guys were upset because back it was like $1 for 99 years that they were paying for their land for a year for 99 years. Well, now they had to pay a regular lease like everybody else. So those are some of the things that have happened with the social justice, not just of the Abzaliga Nation, but with Native Americans as a whole. One thing to remember is I am Abzaliga. I am not Sioux. I am not Cree. I am not Navajo. I am not Iroquois. I'm not Cherokee. And they are not me. When you guys talk about different Indians, if you ever go to around Indians, just remember, we are different nations, just like the French are different from Germans, and the Dutch are different from the Scottish. They're all different nations. That's how we are. There's over 500 nations in the United States. I don't know if you guys knew that. There's 500 different nations besides the United States that live within the borders of the United States. I will leave you with that. Any questions? Yes.
Could you talk a little bit more about just that issue of how frustrating it is that the image, the stereotypical image that media has put out for most of our lives, assuming that I imagine you probably wear a head feather all the time and dressing moccasins, but that kind of just simplistic view of our daily lives and how we don't get a sense of the variety of different nations and how frustrating that is.
You bet. I actually have some pictures of me in my family. This is one I just did a little bit ago, or in one of the classes. This is called Abzaliga in the 21st Century. Because yes, if you see me, I didn't want to wear buckskin because it was too hot. It's just that I don't wear buckskin every day. And and believe it or not, that's how most of my people are. We don't live in teepees, except during the summertime for 1 week out of the year, and then we're glad to get back to our air-conditioned homes. These are pictures of crows in the early 1900s. You see all these guys. There's a Jesuit priest right there. But even the little guys have their headdresses on, which isn't normal. This is crows dancing early in that time, and during a powwow, which they had actually taken away from us for a number of years. This is Curly. If any of you know anything about crow or the history of the battle of the Little Bighorn, was one of the scouts for Custer. Curly is my wife's great-great-grandfather. And this is what he looks like in old age, and this is actually what my father-in-law looks like. If any of you have seen Jeremiah Johnson, he'll probably get mad because I always talk about this. But if any of you have seen Jeremiah Johnson, there's an Indian that takes off running, a Crow Indian, and he slides down the hill. He trips and slides down the hill. Then he jumps up and starts singing his death song while he's getting ready to fight Jeremiah Johnson. That guy singing that death song is my father-in-law. And he's one of the best men I know. He's a great man. This is Crow Fair. Crow Fair is where we put our teepees up. You know, we do it one time a year. There are some of us that go up into our mountains and stay up there during the summertime because it's too hot down south. This is another picture of Curly, I think, or maybe not. Yeah, it's got to be him. And then this is a picture of a Crow woman with her elk tooth dress on and a baby in a buckboard or a cradle board. And then this is about the time around the 1920s. You can see that they're wearing moccasins and some things, and then they've got handmade or tailor-made blankets there. And then these are a couple of Crow children. I don't know if you guys know this, but the buffalo or the elk were as plentiful as a buffalo. You never hear about them destroying the elk herds, though. But the elk, you remember, you guys heard in history about how big the buffalo fields were, or the buffalo herds were, where there's millions of them. That's how big the elk herds were, too. And in historical times, the Crows used to kill. If you look at that dress in the back, those are all elk teeth on that dress. And there's only 2 teeth in every elk, the 2 back bottom ones that work for that. Yes? Yep, they're both ivory. And that's why they're used, is because they're ivory teeth. And every time we hunt, we get those for our wives, because our wives tell us if we don't bring them back, not to come back. And this is my beautiful wife. This is Easter, I believe 2004, 2003. And that's our 2 grandchildren. The one on the right or left is Daydrian. We call him Day Day. And this one is Noelani. We call her Nani's. When her name is Hawaiian, it means heavenly mist. But I tell my daughter, I said, you named her wrong. It should be torrential rain. She used to be a terror when she was little. She was one of those ones that had a mind faster than most people can wind the clock. Her mind was going. And this is them a couple years. This is my beautiful little baby girl. We adopted her in 2007, or we took her into our home. And her parents are both alcoholics. Her father's in prison right now. And her father is my wife's brother. So she's the boss of the house now. But she's just a beautiful little thing, and I talked to her last night, and she misses me. So she told me, "Get home, Dad." This is Day Day again, and I was just showing on this one that, you know, even we have the same dreams that you do. When we fall asleep, we dream about the same things. Noelani, when she was 4 years old, this is her fourth birthday. She had a princess birthday, and I don't know what happened. I just see the picture because all the boys got kicked out of the house, and we had to go find something to do. But she had a blast. Ladarian, or I guess it's my grandson. Oh, Crow culture. Our brothers and sisters are parents to my children. They're dads to my children. I'm just as much the dad as the next guy is my brother's the dad. My sister is a mother to my children. My children can walk around and say, that's my mom, and would not be lying. He can say, that's my mom, this is my mom. And it would be the truth through us. Matter of fact, Indian Health Service had a hard time when we first started working with Indian Health Service, because they say, is your mother with you? Yeah, she's right here. And the next time you come in, who are you? I'm his mother. No, wait a minute, you're not the lady that was here last time. So they started having that problem. Along with that, though, every one of my cousins is my brother and sister. So I have over 32 brothers and sisters. We also have clans, and we get into that too, where you have clan brothers and sisters, you have clan aunts and uncles, and that even gets worse, because you could have a person born that's or just born could be your clan uncle if you were a child of that clan. And how the clan system works is your mother, like I'm Whistling Water, and I'm a child of the Big Lodge. Whistling Water means that my mother's clan, that's my mother's clan, the Whistling Water clan. My father's clan is the Big Lodge. So I'm a child of the Big Lodge, and it's matriarchal. Okay, we follow our mother's clan. We know that we're from that clan. I still haven't found somebody that can say, I don't know who my mother is. But sometimes we don't know who the father is, but we always know who our real mother is. Okay? So anyway, getting back to Ladarian, we as Crows love basketball and we love cross country. Those are our two main things that we love to do. The world stops during tournaments. Believe me, I've tried to work through it, and you just can't work during tournament time for Crows. However, we have a Crow that was in the professional football and a Crow that was in professional baseball. We missed basketball somehow. I think we have one that's in pro basketball, but we don't have one that's in pros yet. You guys all know Archie Bunker? Remember Archie Bunker, Carol O'Connor? His wife was actually Crow. She was enrolled. Their son, the one that committed suicide, well, all of their kids are Crow, I guess, but I can't remember his name. Bo, was it Bo? Was the stage name for his character. Anyway, this is Ladarian, hopes and dreams, just like you and me. We dream of owning our own houses. This is our house when it first got to us. It's the biggest house that we could find, 30 by 80. And this is Noelani sitting on the stoop there, or on the wall of our foundation. And that's our view, where you can see there. We're on top of a hill, and we can see everywhere. This is our beautiful kitchen. My wife loves butterflies and flowers and all that stuff, and you notice there's no beaver skins hanging on the walls or none of that stuff. And in some houses there are. Some houses they hang things up. Artists, our people love art, and we have such good artists. This guy, the guy on the left over here, his name is Waylon. He's actually living in Indianapolis now. He moved out here a few years ago. This art, he designed that mural behind him. This is Willis. Willis passed away a couple years ago. They got in a car wreck, and his head got in between the car and a tree, and so he really got hurt. And then I can't remember his name. This is another one that they did. Can you guys read that? Waylon designed this himself, and then they wrote it out. Oops. I keep forgetting to stop this thing. It says, "He died for your sins." Can you see it now? This was in the youth center that we were working on. And then we have a lot of guitarists, we have a lot of musicians that really love to play, everywhere from piano, drum, art, everything. And then this is Dede and Nani's again, on Easter, strutting their stuff. This is Gwendale. She's one of my nieces, and this talking about they're really involved in sports, and they're really involved in their school spirit and all that. We have 2 high schools in our area. We have the Hardin Bulldogs, and we have the Lodge Grass Indians. And I was just down in your bookstore, and I realized you guys are called the Eagles. So I know that when our crew comes, they're going to be buying up the bookstore stuff because we like Eagles. This is some of the graphic design that some of our people do. This one is just advertising the Tribal Jam, but it was a Native American that designed that. We have a lot of them that are at Graphic Art School right now in Salish Kootenai College. That's another reservation. And then this is, we love our veterans. Like I said before, I said that in that other, is anybody here not hearing from the class that was with Jay? Besides Jay? Anyway, I was talking to them about our society as a tribe. We went from, as a man, you had to do certain things to become a man. You had to, first, we called them, you had to be a little toe, which is somebody that would build the shelters and watch the horses and or cook the scouts and the warriors. Then you became a scout, or in our instance, what we call our scouts is wolves or cheda. And to become a wolf or a cheda, you had to get past that little toe stage, and then you were the one that went out and watched and protected the tribe. And then you went to warrior after a scout, and then then you became a chief, and then a chief of the band, and then a lodge chief, which was the chief over the whole. So, but we always, our warriors are always on our minds. We pray for them when they come home. Like when a veteran comes home, he doesn't come home to just, hello, how are you? There's a drum group there. He gets a headdress. We dance right in the airport. And a lot of times white people get freaked out. They think we're on the warpath. But and then some of them join in with us, but usually they're caught in the middle of it because we start doing a round dance. And there's people standing there waiting for sometimes they'll stand there like this, not knowing what to do because they're waiting for somebody to get off the airplane, and they're caught up in the whole thing. So it's kind of entertaining just to watch everybody around you to see what they're doing. And this is me and my girl Nani's during Crow Fair. Crow Fair is our time to shine. Like I said, we call it the teepee capital of the world. At that time, there's over 1,000 teepees that are put up. Everywhere you go, all you see is teepees. And it's a time for us to come together as a tribe to see each other. This is family time. This is when people that are working in D.C. or Washington or California, they take that week off and come home. And we all stay in our teepees and tents, and about 9 months after this, we usually have a growth spurt of children. And we have tribes come from all over, everywhere. So I was telling Jay, you can find a crow in any Walmart. And I tried that theory here the other day, and I lost because we couldn't find a crow there. But I'm still going to try it again. And this is some of our regalia at Crow Fair. We have a parade every day. This is one of my sister-in-laws, Kim Yellowtail. And this is myself and my brother-in-law. We're in the Res Hat division of the parade contest. That's my father-in-law. He's in the headdress division of the parade contest. And then this is a bunch of our children. Right now, Hunter, this one right here, she's at school in Maryland. The next one to her, Gwendale, is going to Little Bighorn College. Jessica on this side has been in the Army for a year now. Then the other ones are too little and they're still in high school. And this is Gwendale and Jolie. We call her Roly Poly Jolie when she was little. But you see, like, even on the front there, there's that hide, that elk hide. But in the background, you see all of our vehicles. And yes, we all drive new cars. We don't ride horses everywhere. This is my wife's grandmother. She was about 90 years old in that, 88, 89, 90. At that age, she was still a senior companion. She was driving to other old people's houses that were 10, 15, 20 years younger than her because they were shut in. She'd go visit them. She was still driving around. She quit driving when she was about 90 because she started running into things. One of them was my house. But it wasn't the house that we brought up there. It was a trailer, and she hit the front tongue of it. She didn't know it, but we're all sitting there, and all of a sudden the whole house went like that. And we thought, earthquake? And then we thought, in Montana? And we went outside, and she was getting out. She said, "Did I hit you?" She was a great woman. But that next to her daughters, one of my mother-in-laws, and you guys are going to love this. We cannot talk to our mother-in-laws in Crow, and our mother-in-laws cannot talk to us. So that's a slice of heaven that you guys haven't taken from us yet. But it's out of respect. If I'm sitting in a room and my mother and nobody else is in there, my mother-in-law walks in that room and sees me and nobody else, she'll turn around and walk out. At first, I thought this because she didn't like me. See, I grew up off reservation, and I didn't know all the rules. I have to learn them as I make the mistakes of them. When I first met my wife we went and seen her parents, and her dad and mother came and sat with us at the table. I grew up off reservation, so I'm used to staring at people. You know, we give eye contact. On the reservation, that's a no-no. You look down when your elders are talking to you. But I was sitting there making sure I made good eye contact with my future father-in-law and future mother-in-law, and they were asking me questions, and I answered. And so finally, I asked my mother-in-law a question, and then I asked her another one, and she got up and walked out. And I thought, oh, great, I just blew it there. And my father-in-law knew that I didn't grow up on the reservation, so he was cordial enough. And by the way, my mother-in-law actually is not Crow. She's from Virginia. She moved there, married my father-in-law, and she speaks better Crow than most Crows. She speaks more Crow than I do, and I did not know she was Crow until my wife told me. But she follows Crow tradition, and it's kind of funny because she follows, I didn't, so we had a role reversal there. But anyway, if my brother-in-law is with me, in Crow, we call each other Baji. That's your brother-in-law, your Baji. And she'll come into the room if it's time to eat, and she'll say, "Devereaux, tell your Baji to come and eat." She can't talk to me, and she can't even when somebody's around, she has to go third person. So, and the only way that they can talk to you, if we meet in public and we're doing something in public, there has to offer me a cup of coffee or tobacco, which she just offered me a cigarette, or money, which she'd offer me $1 to talk to me. And it took me a long time to get used to that. But when we were leaving the house that time, I said, I don't know what I did. Thought I was being nice. And my wife says, "You looked at my mother and you talked to her." And I said, "Yeah, you're not supposed to do that." I said, "Well, thanks for telling me." Waited till after the problem before you told me. So that's our family. This is a birthday party for Noelani. I think it's her first birthday. This is what the cake looks like at the beginning when she gets into it, and that's how it looked at the end. She really enjoyed it. This is some of the fun the kids were having. They all put on these goofy glasses. This is masquerade. I put this in because of the time of year it is. We used to do this in the spring, the crows did, but now they do it right around Halloween because you guys celebrate Halloween with ghouls and goblins. Every one of the females dancers here is actually a guy, and every one of the male dancers is a woman. They switch roles, outfits, and if they were here, they'd be running in, they'd be sitting down on your lap and doing these numbers, or they'd walk up to you and just they'll embarrass you to no end, and you got to sit off and just have a good time. And it's all it's a contest to see who can be the biggest ghoul or the biggest clown. Actually, it's clowns. The masquerade is they're clowns, but they look ghoulish at times, and they put on these really goofy outfits. They find cardboard to put on for leggings, and they'll wear one moccasin and one tennis shoe, and just the weirdest things, but it's funny. That's coming up here in 2 weeks or a week and a half. And then this is my brother. How tight families are getting. One of the questions, the first question they ask when you start dating is, who's your mom and dad? Because they want to know if you're related to the girl you're dating. We have so much we have tied into each other as far as marriage, that this is the only family that I can be married to without marrying into family. So luckily we have now, next generation, we won't have a family we can marry into. Yes. To a point, there's certain tribes that is good for us to marry into, and then there are certain tribes that better not marry, and then there's certain, just doesn't matter. Crows are actually very friendly people. They invite people. We invite people into our house, and we're very nice that way. And that's part of what has caused us problems is we have been too nice at times and allowed things to happen. So, but yeah, crows are very nice. And this guy is a champion dancer, champion traditional dancer. This powwow that we're having there, that little powwow, was for their grandma when she turned 90. And then this is Devereaux, one of my other brother-in-laws. This is Devereaux's daughter, Hunter. She's the one that's going to Maryland now. And this little outfit she has, that belt buckle is beaded, that Winnie the Pooh thing on her neck there is beaded. Her leggings and her moccasins are beaded. That dress is about $300 by itself. So that outfit is about $1,000. Some of them have the jingle dress and a fancy shawl and a traditional. So there's a lot of money goes into those outfits. And this is the only time you'll ever see me dance regalia. I danced there and they laughed at me, so I don't dance anymore. And this is myself and my lovely wife during the celebration. We're part of your guys' society now. We're not somebody from the past. We're not somebody that's long gone. I was telling the class earlier, I don't live in a teepee because if I did, my Saturday dish would probably knock it over. So when you think of us as people that are here now. Think of us as you, because that's who we are now. We're not somebody that's from the distant past. We speak English. Some of us not very good, but we speak English. My tribe is one of the tribes that our language is still our first language, our Crow language. Like I said, I grew up off reservation, so I didn't learn my language. And sometimes I feel like a foreigner in my own place because of that. But we're people. And when you start thinking about social justice, you've got to understand the people that you're working with. So I just leave that with you. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah, we stick them in the ground. We used to stick them in. You're probably thinking of the Sioux. They used to stick them on the top. We didn't do that. We stuck our people in sides of the cliff, you know, little rock outcroppings. But since the shovel came along, now we bury just like other people. So, any other questions?
Does the younger generation, are they open to learning about the past or wanting to be modernized?
It's kind of well. You guys, how many of you guys grew up in Indiana? How many of you grew up in Evansville? How many of you know the history of Evansville? How many of you know more history about Indiana? Do you know the battles that happened around here? Do you know the history around here? Do your parents have knitting clubs or things like that? Is there little artisans around here? Is Indiana, this part of Indiana, known for any kind of thing like that? That's the way we are. We have history. We grow up around that history. We understand who our parents were, and it's not that far back for us. People who talk to Curly or talk to Plentycoo or talk to those chiefs, they were little kids, but they remember. There's not very many of them left now. My wife's grandma was one of them. My wife's grandma knew my family that I didn't know, and she was very good friends with. When I first came back, I didn't even know who my relatives were, and I'd sit and listen to her for hours. She'd just tell me everything about my family. And one day I said, well, I just want to know where I fit in. And she said, oh, don't worry, we claim you. So I said, okay, good. But that's just how we are. We know what our history is. We know who the people are. And so we live it. You know, it's just like you guys live it, how you live your family history. Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you. I really enjoyed being here, and I just thank you so much for having me.